Joining us on the line right now, Mark Halperin, author of the new book, or co-author of the new book, Double Down, Game Change 2012. It's been much the buzz around town, Mark. So glad to have you on the program. You know, one of the things that you talk about in this book was how Mitt Romney looked very closely at Governor Christie as a running mate, and at the end of the day, decided, it's just not worth the trouble. There's a lot of little issues that would have to be, discussed if he would become my running mate. And yet, however, we hear today, in the wake of yesterday's election, that, Christie may be, the future of the Republican Party. If he becomes the future of the Republican Party, are there some things he's going to have to explain?
There are, and some of them are the very things Governor Romney looked at. Look, Chris Christie is a guy of extraordinary strength and extraordinary weakness, potential flaws, and Mitt Romney saw that. At the time he was looking for a running mate, one of his advisors told him, look, we're in a street fight with Barack Obama. We're not going to win this election without going head-to-head with him in a brawling fashion. Our party has the best brawler in the country, and Chris Christie, let's add him. Governor Romney was attracted to that, attracted to Chris Christie's ability to make the case, and that's, if he runs for president, people will see that. But he also was concerned. Some of the things that his vetting team asked Chris Christie to hand over, they did not get in a timely fashion, which is unusual. Normally, if you consent to be looked at as a potential vice president, you turn things over right away. But they also got back some stuff that gave them some pause. And some of those issues, which we read about in Double Down, not necessarily things that were illegal or even unethical or problematic, but the politics of it were stuff that worried Mitt Romney, and he felt like it was too much risk to add a guy to the ticket and then have weeks of controversy over some stuff from his background.
Well, okay, so what is the worst of that material?
Well, it's a good question. Again, I don't know that any one of them stands out as a smoking gun. For Governor Romney, it was more the accumulation. For instance, when Governor Christie was the U.S. attorney in New Jersey, the inspector general there, and did an investigation of some U.S. attorneys' spending habits about when they traveled. Governor Christie was deemed by that investigation of the people they looked at to be kind of the most flagrant violator of the rules, stayed in fancy hotels, including in Washington and on other trips, in a way that raised some questions and were left somewhat unresolved. That was one issue they were concerned about. They were also concerned about his work as a lobbyist. A lot of people don't know, before he got into politics, he was a lobbyist. That's not necessarily the most popular profession around the country, although in Washington does a little bit better probably. And then questions about his household help and how they were paid, the kind of things that come up all the time for politicians. So as I said, there wasn't any one thing that was great concern. His health records were also something the vetters were concerned about. But Governor Romney felt like these things were not looked at in New Jersey. One of Governor Romney's advisors, who also works with Governor Christie, said, look, this stuff's all been looked at in New Jersey. And Governor Romney, showing the kind of political instincts he didn't always show as a presidential candidate, said, totally different. You run for president or vice president, you get the kind of scrutiny that even in the most politically tough states, this doesn't happen.
Yeah, I'm thinking if he was on the ticket, he wouldn't have given Obama a big hug there during Katrina or during Sandy.
Yeah.
Mark Halperin's our guest author of the new book, Double Down, Game Change 2012. And Mark Halperin, I got to thank you because you have done a great public service. You've reminded the world that John Huntsman actually ran for president 4 years ago. I'd completely forgotten he was in the race, but according to your book, he was the source of the suggestion that Mitt Romney, or his campaign was the suggestion that Mitt Romney hadn't paid any taxes for a decade, and also the Herman Cain story, the scandal that blew up his campaign, also you claim came from the Huntsman campaign. Abby Huntsman, daughter of John Huntsman, pushed back against this yesterday, said your book isn't based in reality, said there's very little even worth responding to, but it was a conjecture, deception, and self-promotion. Please respond, Mark Halperin.
We did over 500 interviews for the book, including a lot of work on the Huntsman campaign. You're right, his campaign didn't do too well, was not the most memorable effort of all time, but it's a fascinating story about a guy who was President Obama's ambassador to China as a Republican, and then decided to come home and run against his old boss, and was not very warmly received by the voters, but was not warmly received by a lot of Republican people in politics and by the White House. And that story of how he goes from being Republican governor of Utah to Barack Obama's ambassador to China, back to being a Republican presidential candidate, we thought was a great yarn, and some of the things that we reveal about how his campaign conducted itself is kind of a great tale, because Governor Huntsman complained constantly as a candidate that our politics was too negative, it focused too much on the trivial, and yet at the same time we document in the book, and this is rock-solid reporting as is the rest of the book, that his campaign had very dirty hands when it came to playing the kind of rough politics that he publicly was decrying.
You know, you're a senior political analyst for Time and MSNBC. You're a guy who understands how this town works. And so we have just seen in Virginia this election where, it seemed like Terry McAuliffe was way ahead by, 12, 14 points. And then all of a sudden, Cuccinelli, he makes a rush at the end. And many people believe it's because he rode the Obamacare issue. And now we're hearing that the Democrats are saying, oh, no, it wasn't Obamacare. Terry McAuliffe supported Obamacare, and he won. Do they really believe that? Seriously, they don't believe that, do they?
Brian, I think it's pretty clear that any Democrat who's going to have to defend Obamacare in next year's elections, the way things stand now, is going to feel that it's a politically perilous situation to be in. And I think, look, it's very hard in the last weeks of a race to kind of to tease out what the factors were that had the result end up the way it did. I don't think there's any doubt that Ken Cuccinelli's most potent talking point in the end was going against Obamacare. He was not a great candidate. The race, I think, was always going to be closer than some of the public polls had it. You have what sometimes people call natural tightening at the end. But there's no doubt that right now you got a lot of nervous Democrats who say if the substance of the program can't be fixed, if Obamacare looks as poorly rolled out in a year as it does now, there are going to be a lot of Republicans who don't lose by 3 but win by 3 just running on that issue. And the White House is going to try to turn that around, not just because of the politics, but because they believe in the program. They want to make it work.
Mark Halperin, we only have 30 seconds, but you're an expert on the 2012 campaign. If the revelations with regard to people's personal health insurance and the fact that they're losing it because of Obamacare, if that was made during the months leading up to the election last year, would that have made a difference?
I think it would have made a big difference, and I think it's unfortunate that it's clear that a lot of decisions were pushed off, a lot of revelations were pushed off for political purposes so the president could help get himself through the election. The press didn't do a good enough job on that issue, but frankly, neither did the Republicans, in part because Republicans nominated Mitt Romney, who, because of what he did in Massachusetts on health care, was not the best person to prosecute that case.
All right, I got another 20-second question because I just got another 20 seconds.
They gave us an extra minute.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Is Jay Carney, is he about done there? I mean, I'm watching him in the briefing room, and it's painful to watch. He's having to defend what many people believe is pretty indefensible, which was an out-and-out lie by the President of the United States.
Brian, he's been in that job a while now. Jay's my former colleague at Time, and I think has learned how to do the job pretty quickly, pretty well. But over time, other press secretaries have said the same thing. It's just kind of the string runs out. I would be surprised if he stayed on, but as best I can tell, he likes the job, and he's got to go up there and defend, as you suggested right now, something that is difficult, if not impossible, to defend.
All right. Listen, thank you so much. Congratulations on the book. Doing very well, I see. Mark Halperin, always a pleasure.
Appreciate it, guys.